Set 10's final patch brings some wild changes. There's loads of new comps you can play, like Evelynn Reroll, 8 Mosha, and AD Blitzcrank. Yeah, I told you the changes were wild, didn't I? So in this video, I'll go over the biggest changes and all of the new comps you can play in this final patch of Set 10. But what else is new in this patch? Which of the existing comps are seeing buffs? And how do you make AD Kench work? But before we get into that, I'd like to thank you guys again for my channel's success in Set 10 and subscribe for more goody cooks in Set 11. Okay, so let's start with the newest comp on the block, and that's Evelynn Reroll. And this is what it looks like at level 9. Now, you may be thinking, Goody, why are you showing this comp at level 9? Well, that's because this comp has an extremely powerful and simple early game where you can just play more crowd divers or superfans as you level. And Evelynn will continue to one-shot units, especially in the early to mid game. So this comp is extremely straightforward to play even while you're sitting on the toilet. And once you hit Evelynn free, you can just send it to level 9. But I will say that I find 4 superfan to be necessary since Evelynn has loads of burst damage from 6 crowd diver, but not that much sustain from Hodge. So superfan keeps her covered. But in the case where you get headliner KDA Evelynn, you can play this board instead, but 6 crowd diver is definitely far stronger. Now the reason why these buffs are so strong for Evelynn is that first, with Titans and KDA, Evelynn is surprisingly tanky and sometimes she can out-sustain the damage she takes. And the reduction in her mana cost means that Evelynn can chain ult due to her attack speed boost. But in turn, if Evelynn gets interrupted or CC'd, she can lose a lot of momentum, especially if she's stuck on a high HP tank. That's part of the reason why Evelynn Reroll is a high floor, low ceiling comp. Early game, it's extremely powerful, but it can fall off late game due to Evelynn getting CC'd, struggling into high HP tanks, or your frontline just disappearing to certain late game carries. Superfans just aren't that great late game. That's also why rushing 9 is so important. The sooner you can hit Kiana, the sooner you can farm extra items and bolster your damage and frontline. Evelynn is still really strong in the late game. I mean, she can even beat Crabbrave with the damage and sustain from her chain ults. And that's also why talent search is phenomenal on this board, as Neeko's buffs grant mana to Evelynn so she can snowball faster. But speaking of Neeko buffs, how do we make her work? Well, the route I took was to enable Neeko's tanking ability and focus on her sustain so she can keep ulting and granting mana to a better carry, namely Karthus, Akali, Yorick or Ahri. These units can scale out of their mines with extra casts, and this version of Neeko makes that possible. So generally this is what your board will look like with Neeko as your headliner, with some variation depending on which headliner version you get. Your actual carry can be whatever you want, Ahri, Seraphine, Karthus or Yorick. That just comes down to which items you have. But if you get headliner KDA Neeko, I would aim for 7 KDA, especially with this buff in this patch. Your board will have so much HP and damage from this breakpoint, and Neeko will keep giving mana to Ahri and Akali. The Neeko-Akali combo is amazing from what I've played, as Akali just doesn't stop casting. But speaking of trait buffs, there's also 8 Mosha, which grants insane attack speed and Omnivamp. This breakpoint is amazing, and I definitely would recommend you play it, because seeing units like Yorick with loads of attack speed is hilarious. I've seen the most success via rushing level 9 to find all the Moshas, but I had an amazing game with Set Reroll, where he was just unkillable due to the ult damage, shielding and healing. But if you want to play 8 Mosha, I would recommend putting Jhin in the back, especially with his buff in this patch. It can be very useful to have a ranged carry that can dish out loads of damage. And if you get a Mosha spat, you can give it to Jhin, or you could give it to Kayn because he's a money printer with his buff in this patch. But generally, any carry can make 8 Mosha work because it just has so much raw base stats for all of them. Especially Na, who's also seeing another buff on top of 8 Mosha. If you want to see how to play around Na Reroll, then you can check out my guide. Likewise, Gragas is seeing a humongous buff to both his sustain and damage. Gragas is just unkillable in this patch, and you actually love to see it. My Gragas guide is perfect for this buff version of Gragas because Vertical Spellweaver is where he truly pops off, since the AP from Vertical Spellweaver results in nasty damage. But I still think Gragas will want tank items because he'll fall off late game otherwise, as he won't be able to survive. And in the same vein, Garen is also seeing huge buffs alongside Corki. So rerolling these two together is great because Garen scales insanely quickly and Corki dishes out loads of damage, especially with buffed Big Shot. Again, if you want to see how to play Garen reroll, then my guide has you covered. And K'Sante is getting a whopping 999% AD ratio, which is insane. He just one-taps everything. Last plug, but again, I've already got a guide for K'Sante reroll if you want to check that out. The only change being that if you want to maximize K'Sante's damage reduction, he needs 120 AP. So I would recommend playing Spellweavers like Ahri and Seraphine for 15 AP for your team, then Titans for 50 AP, Hodge for 15 or 30, and then another Hodge or another Titans. That should maximize his DR. Now, speaking of Titans, we have AD Blitzcrank. This Blitz buff is funny as hell because his AD skyrocketed, which of course means that since Blitz goes with AP and now AD, Titans is a great item for him if you want him to hit hard. And that mana buff means that Blitz can keep himself shielded and his ult can get through the tanks. In terms of items, Blitz's base AS is 0.6, so Rage Bait can be okay, but Vertical Disco can be better to give Blitz sustain and that attack speed. I personally like spamming Titans or Sterak's because it also increases Blitz's tankiness. Last and most definitely least is AD Kench. Like Blitz, Kench is seeing a massive AD buff, but Kench's flat damage reduction is also going up. Now I say this is the least because no matter what I do, I cannot make Kench work. With AD items, his attack speed is just too low to auto often enough, and with AP items, he takes too long to scale and just gets obliterated. I mean, I kept him running into problems with the buff Edgelord and Ribbon just one-shotting Kench regardless of his AD or AP. Kench just won't deal any damage against late game boards, and he doesn't have enough time to scale to tank either. I mean, maybe this is a skill issue, but I cannot make Kench work at all. But those unit changes aren't everything. For example, EDM is seeing huge buffs, especially to Zac. Now, I will say that sampling Lux is definitely stronger than Zac, but sampling Zac is way funnier because you can just perma-stun enemy boards. This patch also introduces the new loot system and prismatic orbs, which greatly improve TFT overall. Honestly, the new prismatic orbs are very, very sick. Although I do think getting support anvils out of them kinda suck. But everything else is really cool. And if you didn't see, they're adding the Crab Rave song to the portal. And honestly, it's great, I love it. But for the most part, that's it for this patch. The only thing in this patch that I didn't get to test is playing multiple Neekos with talent search so they can generate infinite mana. So if you manage to get that on your board, let me know how it goes. For now, this is my last set 10 video, and later I'll do my last set 10 stream before moving on to set 11. I am kinda sad since set 10 was great, but let's look ahead to see how much fun we'll have in set 11, and how many wacky comps I can cook up in there. But with that, I will pass over the questions to you guys. What do you think of this patch and these comps? If you tried them, how did they go? And like me, are you looking forward to set 11? Let me know in the comments, and remember to subscribe. Anyway, check out these other videos if you want to see more from me, and as always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in set 11, or on stream.